Welcome to an emergency edition of the All Cardinals podcast. My name is Donnie, Druin, joined by my co-host Richie Bradshaw. Richie, this all happened so fast, probably within 5 to 10 minutes of each other. I was done writing for the day. I was going to go to Safeway, probably get some dinner from me and the wife. You were taking care of your dog, and all of this just kind of like hit the fan, for lack of a better term. Within basically a stone's throw of each other, Sean Payton lands with the Denver Broncos. DeMeco Ryans lands with the Houston Texans. We're going to break it all down here. What it means for the Arizona Cardinals moving forward. We'll go ahead and we'll touch on the obvious one. Sean Payton to the Denver Broncos, first broken by ESPN's Adam Schefter. Broncos seemed like they were willing to play ball. It's funny because last week, Payton pushed back the second interview with Denver to interview with Arizona. Things go great. He's hopping in cars with team owner Michael Bidwell, spends all day at the Cardinals facility. And then all of a sudden this kind of comes, I don't want to say out of nowhere, but man, like you really thought Sean Payton was out of the running there for a while. But the Denver Broncos were able to make it happen. Compensation will be Denver's 2023 first-round pick and next year's second-round pick going to the New Orleans Saints for Sean Payton and the Saints' 2024 third-round pick. Initial thoughts, initial reactions, because the Saints got what they wanted.
Yeah. First of all, hats off to the Saints because it was very interesting to kind of think about, what can they get for Sean Payton. We've seen NFL coaches get traded before, and we've seen coaches go for multiple first-round picks. Like the biggest example I can think of was John Gruden over 20 years ago when Tampa Bay traded for him from the Raiders. They gave up multiple picks in order to secure him. He helped them win a Super Bowl. We haven't seen a blockbuster trade in a while. Bruce Arians was traded to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, funny enough, from the Arizona Cardinals a few years back, but it wasn't to this magnitude. Now, Sean Payton is a future Hall of Famer in my books and in several other people's books. So it was one of those things where it was like, is he going to actually go for a first-round pick, or is he going to go for multiple picks? Like, it wasn't really for certain what his value was going to be because he had taken a year away from coaching. He went into analysis on TV, didn't feel like he loved it as much as he did being on the field. Denver's the one that pulls the trigger. They've got some really intriguing options for him to be able to use at his disposal. The problem is he has to basically deal with what's on that roster because they do not have a lot of picks, Mr. Druin.
Nope, not at all. Really quick in the chat, shout out to everybody that joined in already. Shout out to Mikey Desert Cardinal. What is up, my guy? Hope
Mikey,
your Tuesday is going great. Shout out to everybody else showing us love. So really appreciate you guys. And yeah, man, they dealt their original first-round pick for Russell Wilson. They got one back from the Bradley Chubb trade, but now that's going to New Orleans. And then to answer this question in the chat, did the Saints ask for the first this year? They sure did. And what's funny is because like just in terms of like negotiating, you're not going to come out and say, hey, we'll take a third-round pick, right? Like you want to start low and then kind of meet in the middle to get like an acceptable asking price. From the few people I talked to, it seemed like Mickey Loomis was not going to budge at all. And if you're Saints, think about it. You have no reason not to play hardball there because at very worst case scenario, Sean Payton goes back to TV. He's still under contract for another year. Right. And so this whole coaching cycle thing can start up yet again next year. You ask for a first, and if a team really gets desperate enough, then you can do it. Denver, now notorious for their new ownership and their deep pockets. And that's certainly going to be shown now because Payton was commanding $20 million a year annually. And to kind of put that in perspective, the rest of the buyout that Cliff Kingsbury has in Arizona is $27.5 million years, I think through 2027 or 2028. They're almost going to be giving all of that to Sean Payton within 1 year. So I think if you're Michael Bidwell, you're doing some cost-benefit analysis to that. And similar to the other 3 teams that didn't hire Sean Payton, probably not worth it.
Yeah, it's one of those situations, like you said, where Denver is clearly showing that they aren't afraid to dig deep in that wallet, pull out whatever bankroll they need to do. They showed that they weren't afraid to do that for Russell Wilson last year, not only trading and mortgaging a lot of their future with all the picks that they sent, but they also extended him and gave him a big, fat new contract. Now you've got that situation going on with Payton. But the difference is, Donnie, this isn't salary cap money. This is owner money that is going to be going into Sean Payton. Clearly, you have, you have a lot of willingness from this ownership group to be able to pull in a guy like Sean Payton that you hope can turn the team around, because there was talk this year that the AFC West was going to send 4 teams to the playoffs because everyone was on board with Denver as being a wild card kind of team. Obviously, that didn't happen. Here's hoping for them that Sean Payton will be able to right the ship and get them back on track for that. But you have to appreciate and acknowledge that Denver is not afraid to do what it needs to do. We talked about this off air before we hopped on the podcast. This is very similar to the Los Angeles Rams logic of just, we don't need our first round picks to take gambles on guys when we can get proven players. They trade first round picks for guys like Brandon Cooks, for Jalen Ramsey, for Matthew Stafford. Like they're not afraid to be able to move premium picks in order to get players that they know we're going to be able to help them win. Now, you have to appreciate those kind of moves, that willingness to be able to do that. Denver is trying to do that as well. Now they've done a little bit of addition by subtraction when you trade a guy like Bradley Chubb, but clearly being able to get that first round pick meant being able to land Sean Payton, which could seriously benefit them big time moving forward. If they're able to bring in some free agents, retain some guys, and get some decent players in the draft, they could be back on track to being a wild card team. This definitely isn't like a 12 or 13 win team just because you add Sean Payton, but it does feel like they're a 9, maybe even a 10 win team right now. Donnie, are you there? Okay. Donnie zoomed out. I will take over just for a moment for you guys. Taking a look at the comments here. I know some of you guys are saying no to Flores, no to Vance. Let me know in the comments, would you rather have Vance Joseph or Brian Flores? While Donnie's gone, I'm going to hop on this part of the conversation. What does this mean for the Cardinals now that you are losing out on the Sean Payton sweepstakes? Well, it means that you're not going to have the top of the tree option with Sean Payton. He definitely was one of those guys that it felt like everybody wanted to be in on that sweepstakes kind of thing. And unfortunately, it's just not going to work out that way. However, the good news for the Cardinals is this leaves a lot of really, really good options out there. And I want to stress that there are very, very quality head coach candidates out there. Not that the Cardinals have interviewed all these guys, but you have Callahan from the Chiefs. You have Gannon and Steichen from the Eagles. DeMeco Ryans is out. We were going to talk about that a little later in the podcast as well. But there's a lot of good options that remain out there for the Cardinals for them to be able to go out and get some quality head coaching candidates. I know it's not Sean Payton, and I know that's not going to move the needle necessarily for everybody, but this is still a really good opportunity for the Cardinals to be able to measure what's out there, be able to bring in what they believe could be a really good option and move forward. Donnie, welcome back.
Bro. I'm calling Cox as soon as this episode ends. I promise you, man. I've had internet problems like crazy recently, so my apologies on that.
All good. Check in the chat. I asked you guys if you would rather have Vance Joseph or Brian Flores. So far, you guys are saying Flores. I have to agree. I also would much rather prefer Brian Flores. Before we get that far, Donnie, where would you like to steer this conversation next? Do you have anything that you wanted to talk about with Sean Payton, or do you want to talk about the next head coach that got hired?
We could definitely go with the next head coach that got hired. Really quick, though, just to throw a nugget out for everybody. Usually I have meetings on Tuesdays, and meetings is where I get my information. The person who supplies me said information basically had no update for me. Like, nobody really knows where the Cardinals are going to go with their head coaching search now. I mean, this kind of definitely hits the reset button. That was before the news of Payton and DeMeco Ryans really came through today. So a lot of different options. They have 3 different interviews scheduled for this upcoming week, which we'll get to here in a moment. But it's almost anybody's guess as to who can really get this job now.
100%, man. Like I was saying when you had dipped out for a moment because of your internet, is this is going to give the Cardinals a really good opportunity to take a look at everything that is available for the team, measure all their options, move forward with whatever they feel is going to be the best opportunity. There's still a lot of good candidates out there. I know it's not Sean Payton, but there are some really, really good options for the Cardinals still, and they're not going to have to mortgage picks in order to get them. I think that's the biggest thing to remember here, guys, is the Cardinals need all the capital they can get. They don't have to give up that capital now. Donnie, are you still there? I think Donnie might be struggling again. Let's give him just a second to get back in. Taking a look at the chat, what do we got going on? Especially if you look at the roster and see all the free agents we need to re-sign and refill. Yep, Donnie's out again. All good. We need to wait for an interview of the offensive coordinator for the Bengals. Yeah, Callahan. He would be a really, really good option. You don't magically work with a Joe Burrow and be able to take him so quickly to progress from a great college quarterback to an elite NFL quarterback. He has a legitimate argument for the second best quarterback in football. It helps when you have the weapons at his disposal, but nothing helps more than having a great offensive mind to be able to get the most out of you. It'd be a great option to match him with Kyler Murray, to match him with Marquise Brown, James Conner, Trey McBride, Zach Ertz. There are weapons here for Arizona, and there are premium picks that they can use to continue upgrading that roster. You're not going to use the number 3 pick on a receiver, but a guy could fall to the top of the second round, a Richie Rice, a Joshua Downs. There's options for him to continue building this offense in his image. Not really a lot of free agent options. You could potentially pull in a running back, but I'm not dying to pay 2 running backs here. What else is going on? On the bright side, we're not giving up compensation. Exactly. You don't have to give up valuable assets that the Cardinals need right now in order to move forward. So that means that D-Hop probably will be traded. Yeah, it's definitely the writing is on the wall there. I'm curious what the value is that you could get for him. I don't know that you get a first-round pick, but if you got a second-round pick, that's a big win for a receiver who's missed over a season's worth of time in the last year because of injuries, because of suspension, all that stuff. The good news is he's still a very good receiver, so there is value to be had. You're not trading him for a fourth unless you're pulling a Dallas Cowboys like what they did for Amari Cooper. But you should be able to get some really good options out there. I think Callahan would be a great option. I do too. I think that would probably be near the top of my list. I'm still very much on record as really, really liking Brian Flores to the Cardinals. DeMeco Ryans is out, though, and that's something that me and Donnie were getting ready to talk about, so I'll kind of steer the conversation that way. Continue commenting your guys' thoughts in the comments. I'll take a look, and we'll continue having a conversation while we wait for Donnie to get back online. But with that being said, DeMeco Ryans is officially the Texans' new head coach. There's a lot of dots to connect here. DeMeco Ryans, one of the brightest young defensive minds in the NFL right now, was able to take over almost seamlessly for Robert Saleh, who has once again got a really good defense going on with the Jets. He's got Sauce Gardner. He's got Quinnen Williams. He's got CJ Mosley. They got a lot of weapons over there. And Saleh had a very good defense that took the 49ers to a Super Bowl. Well, DeMeco Ryans steps in, and they're able to keep pace with where they were previously. So that's really good news for his future. You also look at the Houston Texans, and in case you didn't know, I'm sure this is very, very well-known information by now, but DeMeco Ryans was drafted by the Houston Texans. DeMeco Ryans was the defensive rookie of the year with the Texans. He had a Pro Bowl one of his years with the Texans. I believe he's a 2-time Pro Bowler. They both might have been with the Texans. Easy to connect those dots. It's easy to take a player that was once very, very important to the franchise, because DeMeco Ryans actually is one of the better defensive players that have been with the Texans. You can take that with a grain of salt if you would like, considering they've only been a team for 21 seasons. But DeMeco Ryans is a very, very good player. And DeMeco Ryans, more importantly, is a very, very good defensive-minded head coach. He's now with Houston. He now has an opportunity to begin building this team in his image, because let's face it, there's a lot of work that needs to be done for this Houston Texans roster. The good news for them is they have the number 2 pick. They will have an opportunity between Will Levis and Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. Whoever they fancy to be their quarterback, they have the opportunity to trade up to the number 1 pick if they would like. but they also have a second first-round pick. And that is a pick I would anticipate will be used on a defensive player that the team will be very, very interested in being able to give. I almost said Brian Flores, giving DeMeco Ryans a cornerstone for his defense, because right now there's very, very few options. There's Jalen Petrie, the safety, and there's Derek Stingley, the corner. Outside of that, they have some good role players kind of scattered throughout, but there's not necessarily cornerstones outside of those two guys. That other first round pick will allow them to get a cornerstone. This is a very deep edge rushing class. He could be taking a look at a Tyree Wilson or a Miles Murphy or a Luke Van Ness, who's a Iowa edge rusher who's just shooting up boards right now. There's an opportunity for Houston to begin crafting the image here of what he wants. There's some young guys that are there as well. I know Christian Harris was a very quality linebacker for them as a rookie this past season. There's pieces on the defense for him to begin building, but they also should have quite a bit of cap space. They are likely to trade Brandon Cooks, get some more assets coming in. This is a really good hire for Houston. This is an opportunity for Houston to begin moving forward. I think it's their best hire that they've had in a while. I, for one, was a big fan of the Bill O'Brien hire, but since then, I mean, their hires have done very, very little to bring you a lot of hope. They had, I can't remember his name. He had come from Baltimore, I believe. He was a one-and-done guy. And then obviously Lovie Smith was a one-and-done guy as well. Donnie, third time is the charm. We're talking a little bit of DeMeco Ryans right now.
Yeah, I'm not obviously privy to what you guys were talking about, thanks to Cox Internet. So they're going to get a nice little letter from me after this. But I think just in terms of like ideal hires, he was probably like the home run hitter, right? I mean, You talk about a guy who's a very much young and upcoming guy, able to command and just lead a team, the way that he did. And replacing the shoes of Robert Saleh, absolutely no easy task whatsoever. But for him to kind of elevate a lot of the 49ers players on the defensive side of the ball, his ability to relate to players as a former player himself and a relatively young guy, I think that'll speak volumes for everybody in Houston.
100%. One of the things I mentioned was that Robert Saleh is one of the most well-respected defensive minds in football. He took the head coaching job in the Jets. Look how quickly they got a great defense when they're able to spend those premium picks. You look at Houston, they're going to spend their first pick on a quarterback. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. They're not taking Will Anderson. They're not taking Jalen Carter. They have to get a quarterback. But with that other first-round pick, that's when there are options on the board. I mentioned some of the edge rushers, but there's also an opportunity to get a corner across from Derek Stingley. Could you imagine if they got a Christian Gonzalez from Oregon or a Cameron Smith from South Carolina? There's options for them. They could potentially get themselves Brian Breesy, the defensive tackle from Clemson. There's a lot of directions that they can go, but I would 100% anticipate that second pick to be on a defensive player so that DeMeco Ryans can begin building this team in his image.
Yeah, I was going to say, too, what's really funny is that the Broncos actually spent this entire day, sorry if you already brought this up, they spent this entire day trying to get DeMeco Ryans on board before DeMeco apparently told them no one final time. Then they went ahead and they kind of moved the needle for Sean Payton just in terms of getting a trade done. So certainly, like, it all ties in very interestingly. For what the Cardinals are trying to do, what the Broncos have done, what the Texans are now doing as well, and then what the Panthers have done too, because the Panthers got all of these dominoes started to fall themselves with the hire of Frank Reich last week, and everybody kind of assumed that things were going to get going sooner rather than later. And now that the conference championship weekend is over, you're able to interview a little bit more candidates. So I think we're really going to see the pedal hit the floor here, just in terms of the head coaching search, especially with two teams left now.
Yep, 100%. And again, one of the things I mentioned when you were disconnected was the opportunity for the Cardinals to really value all the options that are left, because there are a lot of good options. I understand it's not Sean Payton or DeMeco Ryans at this point, but there is both of the Bengals coordinators, both of the Eagles coordinators. Exactly. Here you go. Donnie's got it pulled up for us right here.
Yeah, so the ultimate question and why all 8 people are in here right now is to find out where does this leave the Arizona Cardinals? Frank Reich off the board. Dan Quinn said he's going back to Dallas for another year as their defensive coordinator. DeMeco Ryans to Houston. Sean Payton to Denver. And shout out to Jean Paul, because it doesn't seem like Peyton was Denver's first choice. And our good buddy Austin Frizzoco, shout out to him. Apparently, according to Benjamin Albright, Peyton wasn't even in the top 3 here, just in terms of guys they wanted. I did think they wanted Ryans, and I did think they wanted Dan Quinn as well. So very interesting to see how kind of like all of this like shifts,
100%. It's one of those things where like this felt like almost a move out of necessity. The good news for them is this, again, like I mentioned, this is a Hall of Fame NFL coach. So it's not like you're necessarily losing, but the Sean Payton situation was very interesting that we got to see. It's nice to know we're finally getting some closure and moving forward with it, though.
No, absolutely. So these 4 guys are completely officially out of the running for the Cardinals' next head coach. And then let's go ahead and take a look at the guys they've already previously interviewed prior to this week. We'll get into the guys that have interviews lined up the next 3 days. But Brian Flores, Aaron Glenn, Vance Joseph, and Ijero Evero. All 4 kind of bring different things to the table, but all 4 are very much defensive-minded guys who have experience as defensive coordinators in the National Football League. Brian Flores and Vance Joseph are the only 2 out of this group that have actual head coaching experience. I'm not really sure how much that weighs for you, just in terms of hiring a guy to take over for a Cardinals team that just went 4-13, hired a first-time guy in Cliff Kingsbury. That didn't go out too well. You have Kyler Murray rehabbing from a torn ACL. I mean, there's a lot that's going to go into trying to turn this thing around. And, do you want a first-time head coach?
I think right now the biggest thing that you need to do is have a guy who is going to be able to steer that locker room in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that needs to be a first-time head coach. I don't know if that needs to be a guy who has head coaching experience. Obviously, you're going to value guys who do have that experience right now, because the last few options for the Cardinals have been guys who were first-year coaches, head coaches. Bruce Arians had never been a head coach before. Steve Wilkes had never been a head coach before. Cliff Kingsbury had never been a head coach before. I think this would be a good change for the Cardinals, would be to get a guy like Joseph or Flores who have been there before, who do understand everything that needs to go in to being a guy who runs the locker room, being a guy who runs the team, helps run the front office, runs all the little intricacies of the team. I think that's a really important step right now for the Cardinals. That's one of the reasons why I personally would value a guy who's been there before. I don't think it's a necessity, because I think that this Cardinals team just needs direction right now more than anything else. But I do think that that is something that is very, very pivotal, very, very important for the team right now.
No, absolutely. And what's funny is that Ian Rappaport went on the Pat McAfee show last week and said that the 3 guys who might be expected to get second interviews are guys like Brian Flores, Aaron Glenn, and Ijero Evero. It kind of sounds like for the time being, Vance Joseph is on the outside looking in, but I feel like we've been saying that this entire time. And just the candidates continue to drop out of the race for Arizona. And at some point, they might be forced to go VJ, because if you think about it, the Minnesota Vikings are waiting to interview Brian Flores for their defensive coordinator position. Ijero Evero, actually, you know what? Evero might have a chance to win the job too, because he's not going to go back to Denver, especially with Sean Payton now going over there. Evero actually refused to take over the interim head coaching duties for Denver whenever they got rid of Nathaniel Hackett. So I'm not
that would be
so sure he wants to go over there. Yep. And I believe Payton wanted Vic Fangio on his staff too. I think that was the rumor name he wanted them to bring back, and that's a whole other can of worms that we can open. But the choice being, Rappaport said that 3 out of 4 of these guys are the probable favorites to get second interviews. Not a bad group. How do you feel about Aaron Glenn? Because I see the leadership he brings. I know people are fans of him coaching underneath Dan Campbell. But when you look at that Lions defense, 32nd in total yards per game, 3rd to last in points allowed per game last year, I mean, the numbers don't lie, Richie.
Here's the thing, is if you were to hire Aaron Glenn, what you are hiring him off of is potential, but also the fact that he has good leadership qualities. He's what many would consider a player's coach, which I find to be super, super important. But that's a personal thing. Some people don't like player coaches because it feels like they give too much power to the players. But I value player coaches because those are the guys that people want to play for. They're the guys that people want to give 100% and go the extra mile for. With Aaron Glenn, I understand that the Lions didn't have a great defense this year. That is a turnoff for me. It truly is. Like, Aaron Glenn is not one of my favorite head coaching options right now. But when you look at what he had to work with, there isn't much there. So let's look at the things that did go right. You have the corner, whose name is escaping me, Jeff Okudah, who had been going through the motions. He was coming off an ACL tear. He had a so-so rookie year. He blossomed this year. He took a huge step forward. I would credit Aaron Glenn for that. Aiden Hutchinson is going to be one of the top 3 defensive rookie of the year candidates. Thank Aaron Glenn for that. James Houston, who was a late round pick for the team, didn't start hardly at all this year. He had like 12 tackles. You know how many were sacks? 8. Thank Aaron Glenn for that. Look at what he was able to get out of the pieces. Deshaun Elliott was another really good free agency bring in for them. He was quality. He was good. Thank Aaron Glenn for that. When you consider what he was able to get out of individual performances, that's a good step in the right direction. Can't value everything that goes into it. Again, I'm not dismissing it because I am not a big Aaron Glenn fan right now. But he could be a really good option next year if the Lions were to go defensive heavy and find a way to add a lot more talent for him to continue working with and get the Lions defense to that next level.
Yeah, the Lions actually might be divisional favorites next year if the offseason kind of pans out like how they want it to. My problem with the whole players coach thing is when you hear somebody talk about the whole players coach identity, you have a couple players back them up, publicly or, whether they're tweeting it or whatever. If you're in the NFL for at least a couple years, you are going to have players like you. You are going to have players want to play for you. It's just the nature of the beast, being in the building 6 days a week with one coach. You more times than not are going to take a liking to that guy. And like my man Agent 47 said here in the chat, Cliff was a player's coach. And I know it feels like everybody and their mother is a player's coach. But I mean, if you were Michael Bidwell, you have the number 3 pick. You have a franchise quarterback in Kyler Murray, which will hopefully return to full health sooner rather than later. You have potential, especially with 30-plus free agents hitting the market too. There's real potential to shift, shape, and mold this roster to what you want it to be moving forward and really rebuild this team. You are going to need somebody in charge that knows what they're doing, that preferably has a track record in terms of coaching and coaching good football. By the minute, it feels like these guys are dwindling on Arizona's coaching search.
They are, but there's still good options out there for them to continue fancying. And that's the thing that I like, actually, about taking off 2 of the biggest targets here. Does it suck? Absolutely it sucks that you didn't get Sean Payton or DeMeco Ryans. But again, there's a lot of good options out here for the Cardinals to continue to fancy. And I mean, heck, there's some guys that are going to the Super Bowl that I'm sure the team would like to bring in. It's just a matter of being patient, going through the process and understanding that this isn't going to be fixed. We're not going to have a head coach tomorrow, more than likely. We might not have a head coach for another week. Truly, it could be that drawn out of a process, but that's not a bad thing, guys. That's not a bad thing. It's a process. So
yeah, up until today, there was one team that had hired a new head coach. I think the Cardinals are on candidate number 11 or 12. It's kind of hard to keep track at this point, but they seem to be interviewing almost everybody and their mother, which kind of brings up a good point from a man, Mikey. Still perplexing, they have not.
Yes, that drives me crazy.
Interviewed Shane Steichen, the Philadelphia Eagles offensive coordinator. You've seen what he's done with Jalen Hurts. You've seen what he's helped do with the Eagles offense in general. And there's real excitement because you have to think one of the major priorities for a new head coach is going to be maximizing Kyler Murray, something Cliff Kingsbury just was not able to do during his 4-year tenure here.
There needs to be an emphasis on whoever the next head coach is to be a mastermind on one of the sides of the football. Shane Steichen is a mastermind for the offensive side of the football. That's one of the reasons why I personally would have him really, really high on my list right now. If not the number one option, probably the number two option. They haven't interviewed him, Donnie, and I don't get it. I don't get it.
I don't get it either. But to be fair, Steichen might be just a little young in his ways. It might not quite be his time. I think if he doesn't get a job this cycle, he's definitely going to get one next cycle. It might just be like a waiting game at this point. And to like your point too, a little bit earlier, it's not about finding the biggest name. Because how many times have we seen a big hire in the NFL just not work out how it's supposed to? Michael Bidwell is not trying to find the biggest, brightest name in the lights. He's trying to find the best guy for the job, whether that's somebody we kind of just trashed in Aaron Glenn, whether that's another guy in Shane Steichen who they haven't even spoken with yet. I mean, it's the very bare minimum you can do is leave no stone unturned. That's something General Manager Monty Ossenfort spoke about in his opening press conference, and that they've done just that so far. Which leads us into the 3 interviews that they currently have scheduled this week. Today's Tuesday, January 31st, which means Mike Kafka, the New York Giants offensive coordinator, is set to interview with the Cardinals at some point today. Could have already happened, could be happening over a plate of dinner at Filiberto's. Nobody really knows, but it's supposed to happen at some point today.
Get him good Mexican food. That's the place to go.
Oh, for sure. I think I saw Kevin Durant there over the summer, funny enough. Kafka has really good experience with the Kansas City Chiefs. He was the quarterback's coach for a while, coach underneath Andy Reid. You saw the job that he did with Daniel Jones over in New York this year, helped turn that team from a 4-13 squad to Daniel Jones winning a playoff game. Definitely something I did not expect to happen to see in my lifetime. So he's set for today. Lou Anarumo, the Cincinnati Bengals defensive coordinator, is set to interview tomorrow on Wednesday, and then Brian Callahan on Thursday, the Bengals offensive coordinator. None of these guys are bad. None of these guys are bad candidates at all. Each of them bring their own strengths to the table. 2 out of 3, though, and what a lot of people are deeming a coaching reset by the Cardinals, 2 out of the 3 of the newer interviews are offensive guys. Take that for what it's worth.
Yep, 100%. I want to highlight what Mikey just put in the comments there. It's not the biggest name. It's the person who can elevate this team into the playoffs and beyond. That's exactly it. You didn't get DeMeco Ryans, you didn't get Sean Payton. That stinks. Of course it does. But right now it's about the guy who's going to be able to take the personnel that the Cardinals have, take the personnel that they're going to be bringing in via free agency or via the draft, and being able to get the most out of them. So I look at these 3 options. I'm not going to lie, Donnie. I love all 3 of them. I truly do. I like Mike Kafka. I like Lou Anarumo. Is that how you say it?
Anarumo. Practiced all morning.
Onomatopoeia. Got it. Yep. And Brian Callahan. I love all of those options. So I personally, of the 3, Callahan is probably my favorite. Callahan would be one of my top 3 candidates right now at overall, with it being some order of Brian Callahan, Shane Steichen, and Brian Flores.
No, for sure. And the kind of touch on Agent 47's comment here. I like this way of thinking, but also at the same time, you're starting to see a problem in the NFL where if you have a good offensive coordinator, they're going to get hired elsewhere. Whereas opposed to if it's your head coach kind of guiding the offense and calling the plays, their head coach not really going to be going anywhere. But I mean, if the Cardinals get to a point where their offensive coordinator is going to be hired as a head coach elsewhere, probably means the ship turned around the way they wanted it to, or at least it's heading in the right direction. So really no complaints there, especially after the 4-13 season we just saw.
It's a process, people. Trust the process. This is new. This is new leadership now. It's a new general manager. It's one of those that needs to take its time. It needs to happen organically. I'm glad the Cardinals aren't forcing things right now. I'm glad they're not like, DeMeco Ryans is the hottest name, we have to bring him in. No. I think that they're doing everything right now by interviewing every candidate right now, besides Shane Steichen, apparently. I really like the way they're going about this. I think this is the smartest way to go about this.
No, absolutely. And like Michael Bidwell kept throwing the term cast a wide net out. And it looks like he really meant it, because I think we're up to 11 coaching candidates now. And the kind of put a bow on this.
Send it to the next person.
The put a bow on this discussion. I mean, this isn't just like a 1-year hire, right? Like you don't want this to be Steve Wilkes. You don't want this to be Nathaniel Hackett. Like you want to find a guy that can help turn his franchise around and push it forward for the future. This is a very big decision for an owner that's obviously been here, who just fired a head coach and lost a general manager. It is a very big decision for a new GM on the job who just got here a couple weeks ago. Probably still doesn't know his way from the office back to his apartment or wherever him and his family are staying at the current moment. It's a big decision. It's a big decision that needs time. Although I do think it's really interesting, Richie, to this point, because I know we have 3 interviews this week scheduled for them. Dan Quinn is the only head coach to have a second interview scheduled.
Dan Quinn?
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you saw these big names like Payton, and obviously DeMeco Ryans kind of like hushed them away on the day that San Francisco took on Dallas in the playoffs, which, by the way, because he interviewed with both Houston and Denver on Saturday, I think those 2 teams were like, hey, you're the guy. And then Ryans was like, all right, here you go, Arizona and Indy. Just my 2 cents, though. But
there goes our PG ranking.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, my bad. Who do you think's going to hire head coach? The Colts or the Cardinals? Because the rumblings is Jim Irsay really wants Jeff Saturday to head back there again.
Jeff Saturday is no, I'm not going to say it on the podcast.
Yeah, please don't.
Yeah, not Jeff Saturday. Jim Irsay is what I meant to say. Jim Irsay is dumb,
stuck in his ways.
Yeah, that's the most polite way I can put it. You want to hear my actual opinions? Get me off mic. But neither here nor there. That would be a very, 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 very stupid decision, which the Cardinals should be here for.
What's funny is that the entire front office does not want Jeff Saturday to be the head coach, but Jim Irsay might overstep that. Just as the Carolina Panthers front office wanted Steve Wilkes along with the rest of the coaching staff to return, and the Carolina's Panther owner said, nope, you're going to get Frank Reich and you're going to like it.
And you're going to like it.
Yep. Any closing thoughts?
I think the Cardinals are doing everything right now, which is not what we're used to. So maintain patience, guys. I know that we want our head coach. I know that we want to know the direction the team is going. Understand that this should never be a rush process. The Cardinals are doing everything right. So keep the faith.
Keep the faith indeed. And to hammer home that point, it's such a big decision, man. And like you just want to make sure you don't miss out on a guy who could potentially change the franchise around. Being a head coach is such a hard thing to do in the NFL, and winning in the NFL is such a hard thing to do. That's why very few people have done it. So I just think it's really important, but also at the same time, like free agency is coming up within the next month. You're going to have to make some really big decisions here starting soon. I mean, JJ Watt's gone out of the picture now. Zach Allen, Byron Murphy, free agents. You still have to figure out what you want to do with the number 3 pick. There's a lot going on, but step by step, I think that's exactly what the Cardinals are trying to do. It's just like my man, Agent 47, I think I said that right, said, don't worry, we will draft Will Anderson or Jalen Carter. Completely agree. I think either of the 2 would be a home run hit. But first, they will need a head coach in order to make one of those 2 guys your newest Arizona Cardinal. That is yet to happen, but I have a feeling it'll happen relatively soon, maybe within the next week, like Richie said. I think within 2 weeks. I think by the Super Bowl, because they do have reported interest in interviewing Jonathan Gannon, but they can't hire him until after the Super Bowl. And Gannon's probably going to be gung-ho and trying to get himself a Lombardi trophy. I think by the Super Bowl, we're going to have a new Arizona Cardinals head coach. There's no sources behind that. That's just my general gut feeling. You would hope it wouldn't take that long, but with these guys, you never really know.
Take solace in knowing it's not going to be Jeff Saturday, people.
Yep, or Cliff Kingsbury, or Steve Wilkes. Yep. Yeah, but I think there's a whole lot of positives we can take.
Or Richie Bradshaw.
Yep, or Donnie Druin. But for Richie Bradshaw and for myself, Donnie Druin, go and follow us on Twitter at RichieBrads36, at Donnie Druin. Go and follow all of our work at allcardinals.com or si.com/NFL/Cardinals. Thank you so much for bearing through all the Wi-Fi BS, but we will be back better, stronger, maybe even doing a giveaway here soon. So thank you guys so much for all the support, and we will see you guys next time.